The Princess Bride is its very own type of fairy tale, and today we're going to go through a few plot devices that will help demonstrate something deeper that you may have missed as you've watched it 1, 2, 300 times. So I believe that every good story has something called a dramatic question. And for me, that dramatic question is very simple. It's 3 little lines long. And you ask, will protagonist do, accomplish, defeat blank, even though blank? And it's a very simple formula. And by using that, you can actually break down a lot of films in fresh and new ways. I think that the dramatic question is separate from thematic questions. And thematic questions, I believe, are usually more open-ended. They're not necessarily answered in yes or no. They're just illustrations on theme, and I think the best stories don't try to answer thematic questions all the way. So this brings us to The Princess Bride. Let's go ahead and plug in the dramatic question. Will blank? This is the first hard thing to figure out. Who is the protagonist in The Princess Bride? Is it Inigo? Is it Fezzik? Who? No one. No one's the protagonist. No, I'm kidding. For the purposes of this video, let's assume that Princess Buttercup is actually the protagonist of The Princess Bride. Some of you in the comments are going to go just ham on me, and that's fine. But hear me out. I know she's not on screen the most, but if you go through and you're asking what exactly are they trying to accomplish, I think that the story is really about Buttercup. So let's break this down. What's the very first thing we see in The Princess Bride? We see this beautiful prologue, and there's this kid, he's playing old baseball video game. He's not feeling well, he's kind of having a lame day, and then who shows up but Grandpa? Grandpa's going to read him a story, the kid's like, whoa, and he's like, is there any sports in the story? And Grandpa's just like, are you kidding? It's got fencing, it's got torture, it's got, whatever. I think prologues are there to try to show something to the audience that would otherwise be very difficult to do through the main narrative of the storyline. It makes them a great candidate to help illustrate arguments for the main thematic question. Then we start to read the story and we get into Buttercup and Wesley, and we have this whole little as you wish and Buttercup. I mean, look, I'm feeling uncomfortable. It's a romantic story, let me tell you. So we have this whole exposition, and I believe the exposition for this story goes all the way up until they've found out that they're in love, and farm boy Wesley decides he's going to go off and try to make his fortune. And sure enough, she finds out that he has been killed at sea. And she says this very prophetic, I will never love again. That is a fairy tale storytelling device. It's really fun when you have a character like just make some wild pronouncement like that, and you can almost bet money on the fact that this whole story is just going to see if that's true. So if we plug in the dramatic question, I think it's very, very simple. Will Buttercup ever love again, even though her true love died? Or, if we want to get poetic about it, even though love died. Then it's pretty simple. We just start going through stuff. First, she gets engaged to a prince. You might think, well, look at that, she's loved again, but she's not in love with Prince Humperdinck, we all know that. And then she gets kidnapped. I think there's no accident that through the rising action of this story, the 3 different kidnappers are basically personifications of different shortcomings of the human mind. You have the very prideful Vicini. You have the very insecure Fezzik, which is fun and ironic because he's so strong and big. Then you have this guy, Inigo Montoya, who's bent on revenge, or in other words, he just can't seem to get over the past. And these are the 3 things that have captured Princess Buttercup. Oh, interesting. That's almost symbolic. It's almost like the author chose those on purpose. What liberates Buttercup from these 3 things? There's this mysterious man in black. Again, I don't think it's much of an accident that Wesley comes back from the dead wearing all black, like he's a phantom, like he's a ghost. After Buttercup gets free of these 3 things, she finally discovers that love is not dead. In fact, the only thing that's going to get her past those problems is love. And we personify love, in this case, by this farm boy, who I will point out never does anything wrong. That's one of my main arguments why Wesley is actually not the main character. He never really makes a mistake. So once we get past those 3 things, Buttercup believes in love again. She's like, I'm going to do it. That's the perfect time for us to challenge and see if it's actually going to work out. She trusts love. Wesley gets captured by Humperdinck, and what happens? Well, it dies. It dies again. You might say that after Wesley and Buttercup reunite, that the dramatic question is answered. Will Buttercup love again, even though love is dead? She finds Wesley again, and there's that. But the story doesn't end there, because this is a cyclical type of thing. We need to see if Buttercup has truly learned her lesson. And I think to do that, the author kills Wesley again to see what Buttercup's going to do. What does she do? Well, Wesley dies, and she won't believe it. That's its own form. Like, denial is not an appropriate way to deal with death. You can't just deny it. But she does. And eventually the wedding happens. There's the whole marriage scene, which everybody just loves for good reason. That guy is just an absolute legend. We have this whole Miracle Max scene, which is kind of fun. Get back, witch! But when we get back to Buttercup, she believes that something's going to come and save her from the realities of her life. And well, the wedding happens. And Humperdinck thinks that he's married her, and then she goes off. And this isn't a really important point. Buttercup does not really learn her lesson right away. We see that when love dies again, she falls back into her similar pattern. She actually decides this time that she's going to end her life. She'd rather do that than be in a loveless marriage. What happens when she's about to do the deed? Wesley comes back. And look at that. Love has conquered death again. And he reminds her. Importantly, Buttercup never agreed to marry Humperdinck this second time around. The first time she did. She did learn some lesson that she can honor those emotions and the important connection she had to somebody by making sure she doesn't treat it frivolously the second time around. So in that way, we ask, well, can Buttercup ever love again, even though love is dead? Yes, finally we figured it out. Dramatic question, solved. Will she love again? Yes. Ironically, by not marrying somebody she didn't love. Weird, I know. Things a stretch? Maybe, maybe not. But notice we don't end the film there. We don't end the story there. We get to go back to this kid in this bedroom. And I think this might be one of the most important scenes in the entire story. Because while we've answered the dramatic question and dealt with Buttercup as protagonist, and we've shown her fatal flaw, we've shown her getting past her fatal flaw in a really creative way, but the thematic question still could use a little bit of help, given that this is such a removed scenario, and the dramatic question is answered in kind of a roundabout way. I think the author really wants to drive it home. So we come back to the grandpa and the kid. There are a couple of points now from the prologue I would like to just highlight. First off, this kid is sick, and who's reading him the story? Grandpa. We don't know where dad is, we don't know where mom is. It just so happens that Grandpa comes to read this story. And he reads a story that is all about the protagonist learning that love can outlast death. At the beginning of the story, the child is very resistant to that idea. He's resistant to kissing books. He does not want to engage. He's not happy his grandpa's there. At the end of it, he's kind of happy to have heard the story. He was sucked in. He liked it. And Grandpa's walking away. And he says, as his grandpa's walking away, Grandpa, maybe you could come read it again sometime. Grandpa says, as you wish, which as we've learned earlier is simply code for the phrase, I love you. And then Grandpa walks out the door and turns off the lights. Now, I think one of the reasons that the movie is so successful is because it does a fabulous job at illustrating the thematic question, the main thematic question, which is, can love outlast death? Should love outlast death? And I think that it's the important lesson that this kid needs to learn, sitting there playing video games and his grandpa walks in. That connection can and should go beyond, even if the other person's passed away or they've left. In some ways, the best possible way to honor that is to share the message. So next time you're watching The Princess Bride, I invite you to tune in a little bit and see if you can pick up on why exactly the movie feels a little bit deeper than it appears at first glance. But like all good fantasy, it's not just what's on the surface. Anyway, thanks for tuning in today. I'm going to go work on my book, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and check out some of the playlists on the channel. There's some other ones I think you will like. We're going to outro with me trying my best at just some lines from the movie. Get back, witch! I'm not a witch, I'm your wife, but after you just said that, I'm sure I not even want to be that anymore. Hey, back, I'll call the Brute Squad. I'm on the Brute Squad. You are the Brute Squad. Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to... It's like the Godfather. Hello, my name... This is terrible. Oh my gosh. Hello, my name... I can't, I'm just... I'm going to offend every Spaniard I know at this point.